This is one of the biggest and tallest buildings in the world. But you've probably never heard of it. The Makkah Royal Clock Tower is a triumph of engineering. At 35 times the size of Big Ben, it has the world's largest clock. With an estimated cost of $16 billion, it's one of the most expensive buildings ever constructed. And at 600 meters high, it contains what is to this day the highest occupied man-made space on the planet. Seeing the tower rise above the city of Mecca, it's hard to get a true sense of its unbelievable scale. This building is in fact so huge that we need to take a moment to show it in comparison to the tallest building in Europe, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, the tallest building in Asia, and of course the tallest building in the world. In whatever city you place it, from Sydney to LA, this clock tower would utterly dominate the skyline. Construction firms from over 10 different countries worked on the skyscraper, including a German firm which designed the clock. But because of its location in Mecca, many of the engineers and architects couldn't visit the site. After all, only Muslims are allowed in the sacred city.
Mecca is very conservative. There's a passport control. There is like a border going into another country.
Some of the construction team, including glazing experts from Poland and Germany, converted to Islam so they could work on the projects.
The company Riva is near Stuttgart in Germany, and their owner, he converted to Islam during that project to be able to come on site and see for himself what's going on and what's happening.
This is the wild story of how one of the world's most unique and ostentatious skyscrapers was built. The Royal Clock Tower isn't just a hotel. It can't be. It's located in the heart of one of the most culturally significant cities in the world. This is Mecca. Every year, up to 3 million Muslims travel here to complete a pilgrimage known as the Hajj. Those completing the Hajj circle around the Kaaba 7 times. It's an ancient ritual that every Muslim must complete at least once in their life. This site is thousands of years old, extremely delicate and constantly crowded. And just a few hundred meters away across the road was where this enormous hotel was set to be constructed. It's pretty much the exact opposite of a straightforward construction site.
It's right in the center of Mecca city, inside the first ring road, which is really the most congested area in Saudi Arabia, and the center of Islam. All Muslims want to go there. You have the Holy Mosque with the Kaaba in the middle.
The religious tourism market is the second largest source of income for Saudi Arabia after hydrocarbons. It contributes some $12 billion annually to the kingdom's economy. That means that Mecca has the largest number of hotel rooms in the Arab world, far surpassing Dubai. It's perhaps then not a huge surprise that this enormous hotel would be constructed here.
And due to the nature of it sitting so closely to the Kaaba and in this very, let's say, sensitive environment, the client reached out to us and wanted to elaborate with us ideas on bringing more meaning to the building.
The hotel needed to be more than just a commercial building because of its location. It needed to be something spiritual.
So we started thinking about what such a building could stand for. And then one of the ideas that was created in those several meetings and brainstormings was that the main tower could function as the minaret of Mecca. At the time when it was planned, would have been the highest building in the world.
The hotel was originally supposed to be just 450 meters high, which would still have made it the tallest building in the world at the start of its construction in 2002. When the decision was taken to transform it into a grand minaret, the height was extended to 600 meters.
Burj Khalifa was not built yet. That was also in planning. And they, of course, then once it was clear that this tower will be 600 meters, they raised to 800 meters, took the record for that one.
But turning this hotel into an enormous minaret wasn't enough. The client wanted even more. Time plays an important role in Islam. There is, of course, the call to prayer that happens 5 times a day. The Athan is the first call to prayer and is usually made from the top of a minaret. The idea of then making this building into a clock tower as well came very naturally. Now, this clock would establish a new second time standard in addition to Greenwich Mean Time. All over the world, Muslims would be able to know the precise atomic time in Mecca. That would allow Muslims to begin holidays and special occasions like Ramadan simultaneously, regardless of where they are on Earth. But there was just one pretty massive problem. Half of the building was already built. By the time the Saudis wanted to extend the height and add that clock tower, half of this hotel was completed. The foundations were well and truly laid and had been designed for a 450-metre tower, not a 600-metre one. That limited the weight of the building to just 82,000 tonnes. For contrast, Shanghai Tower, which rises to a comparable 632 metres, weighs 575,000 tonnes.
So we went into checking the foundations, how were the foundations laid out, how were they calculated, what forces were they allowed to hold, and we saw that they have a lot of reserves in. That's a typical measure in Mecca, that all the buildings have a lot of reserves just for the sheer fact that there is so many people moving through the city and they want to be on the absolute safe side. And then together with a German structural engineer, Meyer Ludischer and partner, we started developing then an ultra lightweight structure that could be placed on top of this concrete tower.
The engineers and designers needed to create a tall, lightweight but strong structure to put on top of the existing hotel. Fortunately, history had already solved that problem. Rewind the clock to 1889 and Gustav Eiffel was planning to build the tallest man-made structure in time for the World's Fair. To build it high and fast and to ensure it didn't sink under its own weight, he came up with the now iconic wrought iron framework structure. This allowed the tower to soar to new heights and redistributed its weight downwards to its base. The engineers of the clock tower began sketching their design by placing the Eiffel Tower on top of the existing hotel. They used high-strength steel and concrete instead of wrought iron, but kept the idea of a framework structure that grew more slender as it rose, like the trunk of a tree. They also kept the same engineering principles from the Eiffel Tower. They would then build their clock and minaret around that framework structure. The lightweight design was then placed on 5 transfer slabs on top of the hotel. There were, of course, a number of limitations that came with this approach. The distance between floors, for example, had to be far higher than normal.
Behind the clock, one floor level is about 12 meters, 12, 13 meters. You could not go with typical floors, then the weight would have been exceeded. And then also the floors are cut out. There's a big void in those floors.
The voids, which made the floors weigh less, were then incorporated into the design and used to display large exhibits and artworks.
So it works well with the exhibition, but that was actually also a reason to reduce the weight of the building.
Now, throughout this video, you're going to see a very different type of on-site health and safety and labour culture to the one that many of you are familiar with and that we at the B1M advocate for. But we've made the decision to bring you the footage in any case to tell the extraordinary engineering story of this project. With the structure worked out, it was time to turn their attention to building the world's biggest clock. The architect of the tower worked with Perot, a German company that had been designing clocks since 1860.
There was a lot of different design iterations that went into the clock mechanism, the clock hands. How do you operate such a big clock, especially in that height?
The clock hands were one of the biggest challenges.
Because of the size of the clock and its immense height, the first challenge was figuring out how to keep the hands from blowing away in the wind. A number of designs were considered, including having the tips of the hands guided by a peripheral track, similar to how a Ferris wheel works or a roller coaster. But that idea turned out to be too heavy. It also had too many moving parts that could malfunction and would eventually need replacing. You would also see the track underneath, ruining the facade.
We didn't like the idea to have a slit, a circular slit around the facade.
So they needed something lightweight and simple. It was decided the hands would be made of carbon fibre, and they would be controlled by a centrally installed clock drive that could hold both of them. The hands themselves measure 23 metres and 17 metres respectively. For comparison, Big Ben's hands are 4.2 metres and 2.7 metres.
With a fantastic team of engineers, we find out that we could use a special carbon fiber to make this clock hand cantilever. So we have this 22-meter long clock hand, mini clock hand, which is completely cantilever. Of course, they have counterweights on the other end to balance.
The wind pressure on this gigantic clock face was also tremendous, not just on the hands, but also on the facade.
The clock face was designed to be slightly concave to shield the hands from the wind, which at this height could reach up to 200 kilometers an hour.
The concavity of the clock was in order to keep the clock hands within the profile of the building. So that's why you have this dish-shaped form for the clock.
There are 4 clock drives, actually 5. The 5th one was also put up on the platform as a spare. And we also have a spare set of clock hands. They are so big that you can actually access them and walk in them. We have a special maintenance switch that actually parks them both in a horizontal position. Once this connection is made, a human being can slide through them. At least it can be done quite easily. You don't have to build a scaffolding that's 500 meters high.
The designers conducted a number of tests to figure out the colours of the clock. It was especially important to work out how it should be lit up at night so it could be most legible.
The obvious idea, let's backlit the facade, but was directly dismissed because technology and quality and definition of the architectural details.
After several trial runs under different weather conditions